Hey guys, welcome to Cheerful Conversations, episode 8. It is the 25th of April, and welcome to the show. I wanted to really start really quickly about there's a lot of stuff that's going on in my life right now, and of course the show is Cheerful Conversations, and I sometimes feel like I have this pressure to come into everything I do and be this super bubbly, like happy, cheerful person all the time. And, so I'm guessing that it might annoy people at times just because it's like, it just seems like I'm never sad. But, I try to reiterate to people that, I have my dark moments, and this week is definitely no exception. My birthday's on Sunday. This is supposed to be like my epic birthday episode, and I haven't been feeling top of my game, and I just wanted to share that because I think, vulnerability is such an important thing to me, and I will bring the energy for this episode. I promise that. But I do just want to be open and honest that like I've had a hard week, and it's not been a fun one. And I spent a lot of earlier today kind of crying, and I know that this is kind of Debbie Downer, and I'm sorry, but I just wanted to be honest and truthful and kind of share that that's what's going on in my life, and it happens to everyone, and it's totally natural and normal, and I know that I'm gonna be okay. And but sometimes it's hard to be cheerful all the time. So I just wanted to start the show on this note. I know it's kind of sad, but we're gonna amp it up in just a second. But just know that if you're ever watching any of my videos and you're like, this girl is like so happy all the time, it's not true. But I do think it's important to really work hard on trying to keep that positive mindset, because it's so much easier to be in a negative space, and we know that we're all going to be there at some point, but we have to proactively work to stay out of that. So with that said, let me run the intro and turn it up. Welcome to Cheerful Conversations. All right, folks, welcome to Cheerful Conversations. I've brought on my awesome co-host, Whitney. Whitney, I know that your last name is not Danielle, but you go by Whitney Danielle, that's right?
I do. Yeah, my last name is Coleman, but yeah, Whitney Danielle is my pseudonym.
Yes. So Whitney and I are going to bring you some awesome news today. I've got a comment that I'll read in a second, but our theme for today's show is networking gone wild. And I love this. It was funny because, just so you guys know, to be totally transparent, Whitney's, came on to the show literally last night. We had a couple scheduling changes, and I reached out to her yesterday, and the timing was just right. We've been talking about wanting to get her on the show, and so some things kind of got rearranged, and so we had less than 24 hours of planning on the show, and we are going to rock it. I'm super excited, and we're going to talk about networking, because that is Whitney's jam. I love networking as well, love connecting with people, and we're going to just pick her brain on all things about connection and getting to know people, and really finding the people who really jive with you. And this is also, as I mentioned, my birthday episode. My birthday's on Sunday. I'm turning 38, old lady. Whitney, how old are you? Do you not want to say?
No, I'm 32.
32. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about birthdays in a second. Angie, who is actually supposed to be on the show, she sent a comment and she said she didn't know we were the exact same age, and she's turning 38 on May 7th. So you guys will see her in the next show on May 9th, so we can continue to talk about birthdays then. But anyways, so I want to talk a little bit about birthdays and some fun stuff, and then we want to dive right into networking. But wanted to start, as I do with everybody who co-hosts this show with me, is to kind of introduce the co-host so you can get to know how amazing they are and whatnot. So Whitney, do you want to tell everybody what you do and who you are and where you're at and all the fun stuff?
Absolutely. So I'm Whitney Danielle, and my website is whitneydanielle.com. That's how I always intro myself. I am a speaker, I am a writer and a blogger, and I have my own podcast show. And yeah, I'm a military brat, so I grew up all over the country, and I got really good at, meeting people and building relationships and socializing and building rapport. And I don't know, I just got really into it. And, as a grown-up, now that I'm a grown-up and I can pick where I go, I've been doing that as often and as frequently as possible. So it's just something that I love. I love travel. I love celebrating, right? Birthdays, you name it. We can celebrate you getting your hair cut. And I'm always pumped to, celebrate life. And yeah, it's just part of who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm on Whitney's email list, and I love her newsletters. There's just so much cute stuff on there, and I'm like, oh, I wish I had all the time to do this. I feel like it would take a long time, but they're really, really entertaining. So definitely check her out. I'll leave leave her website in the show notes and all that fun stuff so that you can get connected to her. And then, what's awesome, I know that you said that you run a podcast. We actually just did an episode together for your podcast, so that we're kind of talking a little bit, relatively since the last time we talked not too long ago. And we did talk about how we met on your podcast, but we can share, give everybody a little preview of what we said on the podcast when that comes live. And so, yeah, let's talk about how we met. So we met in 2016, right? Is that 2 years ago already? 2016. Yeah. So both of us were part of a business mastermind. We got to meet each other in San Diego during the very first retreat for that program. And it was fun. I love San Diego. You were living in San Diego at the time, right?
I was. Yeah. I think the program started in the fall, maybe. And so I want to say it was the fall. And, or no, it was the beginning of the year. So it was 2016. Wow. You're right. It was a while ago.
That's crazy.
A long time.
Yeah, but we didn't meet in person until the retreat, and that was in April. So it's been 2 years since we last saw each other. Is that crazy? We see each other on social media, but we've been connected. And back then we talked a lot about, I think, a lot of the work that I was doing. I was really, really passionate about work-life balance, which I still am, of course. And it's one of the pieces of the many things that I talk about. But that was the big thing that I felt like I was pushing at the time. And I had just started writing my book and all of that. And so we kind of connected on that because I think both of us have that as a priority. Just having fun with life, more importantly, being able to, have a successful career, but then also just having fun with life and connecting with great people and having great experiences. And both of us like travel. So we have a lot of things in common, and I love that. Was there anything that you wanted to say in addition about how we met or anything? Because I can't remember if I missed anything.
Well, I think it's important to say that, we met because people surrounding us said that we should meet because we had expressed what we were interested in and what we liked. And so you doing your work-life balance, and I talk a lot about work-life balance as well, because everybody is always like, oh, Whitney, I want to travel and I want to do all the things that you're out here doing. It looks so much fun. And I'm like, okay, but there's honestly no reason that you can't. I mean, I don't have any sort of magical powers that I'm aware of that you don't have access to. And so I'm really a big pusher in the work-life balance respect. And so people at my table, we weren't sitting together, right? Mm-hmm. We were sitting in two different tables in different parts of the room, but our surrounding people said, hey, you should really speak to Apryl. Hey, you should really talk to Whitney. And that's how we met. So it's always important. And I talk a lot about this in my videos and my show, to connect people who are like-minded, because, your network is who you know and who they know, right? So whoever's sitting next to you, if they know me, now you're connected to me, even though you weren't connected to me originally. And that's the power. I mean, that's networking kind of gone a little bit wild.
Gone
right?
wild. No, totally. And it's funny because sometimes you might come across people that might not have a direct purpose for you, I think that there's a lot of times, even especially in that program, there's just a lot of people who are coaches, but we all specialize in different things. And so if somebody's really struggling with something that it's just not my jam. And, I'm kind of an expert generalist in a sense. So I can look at it from the whole life perspective. But if somebody is really their pain is money, or their pain is networking, or their pain is, is so strong in one area, I might not be the right fit for that person. I'm kind of like the time management and juggle everything in the air and make everything run smoothly. And so everybody's different, but I use that network to say, okay, you know, there are some coaches who work in the business realm and some who work in a more personal space, but they might work with something that's more specific. And I feel that they might benefit having a coach like that instead of me. And so, just knowing that I don't have to bear the burden of like helping everyone, that there are people that have very specific goals and targets in the businesses that they run, and being able to pass that along is like always a good thing. Because, you know, at the very core of what coaches do, they just want to help and serve people. And, you know, we are just one person, so we can only help so many. So, yeah, absolutely love that. The next question that I want to ask you, which I ask everybody, and we take the kind of work aspect out of it, but the question is like, what do you geek out on? Is there just something like random that you just like absolutely love that could be a little quirky, or, but just like what is something that you're passionate about that people might not already know about you?
I think for me, it's automotive. I am a car geek. I've loved cars since I was a little girl, and I've been to car shows and car meets all over the U.S., and I was part of a bunch of car clubs once I was able to drive, and I got one of my favorite sports cars. And so for me, I love almost everything automotive. That's like my jam. We want to talk about like future goals. Like I want to be like the female Jay Leno with, you know, multiple garages and just all kinds of cars from every decade. I'm so excited. That's awesome. What gets me pumped up.
So what car do you drive right now?
Right now I have a 2-seater. I have a 370Z. It's very small, no back seat, don't really have a trunk. I've had it actually our anniversary was on 4/20. That's when I purchased her. So I think it's been 8 years that I've had that car. It looks brand new, and every time it's like when you wake up next to your husband or your wife, like every morning I'm like, every time I go out to my car, I'm like, oh, you're so cute. Like that's how I get around.
Yes, that's like a relationship with the
It definitely is. My longest.
That's awesome. That's commitment. That is commitment. I love it. And then I like to always pull a random icebreaker question out of I just spilled all of them all over myself. But it's a game called Vulnerability is Sexy. I'm trying to get that in there. And just going to ask a question and then clean all this mess up later. So, are you ready for this random question?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, here it is. It is, describe a perfect day.
So a perfect day for me is definitely waking up somewhere warm and sunny. Okay. Doing some yoga, obviously in like the cutest workout outfit, because I want to make sure that's part of the morning, right?
Yes.
The best like Lululemon, something just really, really cute and soft and comfortable. Doing a meditation and yoga with the sunrise, because that's just so much fun, and having a really good breakfast. And then, getting a nice hot latte. I've switched to coconut milk, so it's a coconut milk latte these days. A nice warm latte and reading, hanging out, maybe going to one of those pools that has the bar in it, and they just you just walk in the water to the bar, and the guy makes you something in a coconut, and then you just float away in like a lazy river, and I'm reading like my favorite book next to like a dog that's also floating on a floaty. Like that would be. And then maybe going for a drive, in the perfect car on the perfect day. Just cruising right into the sunset, going to get some cupcakes and maybe a Moscow Mule on a rooftop.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I mean, and it's funny because I feel like sometimes perfect days can be super simple. I was trying to think about what I would say to this. And I think somebody's asked me, what would be your ideal day? And I must have answered that on a podcast or something a while back. But I feel like if I had to today decide what would be a perfect day for me, it would be one where I had absolutely no agenda or no need to be accountable to anything. And I could literally, by the second, decide what I wanted to do. And so it could mean that I might lay in bed all day and not shower and just like lay there and or sleep. I'm not really sure, but to not have to say, oh, I have to be here and I have to do this and I have this scheduled, like to have nothing on my calendar and just be able to be at choice every single second of my day. That would be a perfect day for me. So I don't know what that would entail, but yay. Awesome.
That's the perfect part about it.
I know. It's like, there's just no plan, which is funny because I'm such a planner and I'm definitely craving that these days. Great. And so one last thing before we start talking about all the things that I want to talk about in this amazing show. Every show that I do, I pull a question from the Ask Apryl Anything pool, which is just this big hunk of questions that people have asked me over time that I want to make sure that I answer. And I decided, since we're talking about so much fun and different stuff, and we're going to talk about birthdays and things that we want to accomplish and goals in life and reflecting on all of that, this is a question that somebody asked and we can both answer it. It is, what is on your life bucket list you fear may not be checked off? I'm not really sure when they said you fear may not be checked off, but yeah, what's on your life bucket list and why do you want to check that off your list? So I didn't even think about the answer to the question. I was just like, that's a really good question. You want to go first or do you want me to go first?
Well, I did think about it. I always try to go with the first thing that comes up.
Yeah.
And the first thing that came up for me was hot air balloon. And
I haven't done that either.
It's something that, it's like horseback riding. I'm obsessed with it, but I'm also really afraid of it. Mm-hmm. But I really want to do it, but I'm really scared of doing it. But like, I really, really, really want to do it, but I'm also really, really afraid of it. So that's kind of how I feel hot air balloon would be for me. But, you know, living in San Diego, it's like the perfect place to do hot air. And every time I would see them, I'm like, I want to do that. And I really do. I want to do that. So it's on my list. I need to do it.
Okay. So I want to do that as well. So let's see who does that first between you and me, or maybe we'll do it together. That would be super fun.
That's true. That'd be great.
Because where are you right now? You're in Texas, right?
No, right now I'm in Virginia.
Oh, you're in Virginia. Okay, so you can't keep track of you. Yes, you live in Virginia. Okay. Yes. So hopefully our paths will cross at some point, and then we can just go do that together. But it'll have to be nice and sunny and not cold, because I can't imagine doing that in cold weather. They don't do that, do they? I don't know. I
don't think so. No, I mean, so there is a hot air balloon festival. I don't know if you've seen the images online.
I've seen that, but I don't know where it is. I'm like, oh, that would be really fun. Do you know where it is?
Yeah. I don't. But it's somewhere beautiful. I want to say it's in California somewhere, if I remember correctly, but it may not be. But either way, I feel like that's like the best. It would be like the car show for hot air balloons. Like everything's going to be there, all the different kinds. You'll become like a hot air balloon connoisseur and nerd as soon as you leave. Like that would be the place to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a comment from Angela, who we both know as well. So we'll say hi, Angela. She just sent some hearts over. Okay. I didn't answer the question, so I need to make sure that I do that. I think this is really hard for me because I have gotten into this, just like we were talking about earlier, how, people want to have better work-life balance, and it's like, why don't you just create that? And I've been working really, really hard on doing that. So all the places that I want to travel, all the things that I want to do, I haven't, I have active plans to do stuff that are on my bucket list. But I think one of the big things, maybe travel-wise, and then I'm also a big daredevil, so like a lot of the daredevilish things that I want to do, I do. I think in terms of activity, I haven't tried rock climbing yet, and it's definitely something that's on my bucket list. I feel like it's so simple and so easy to make that happen, but for some reason I haven't done it yet, and I was so close to a couple weekends ago, but then we kind of diverted our plans and went and saw Black Panther instead, so that's still on my list. And then in terms of travel, location, I've never been to Spain. Have you been to Spain? No? And that's definitely a country that I want to go to. So I think that would be my answers. Either travel to the places I haven't been to yet, and then do rock climbing. So, yay!
Rock climbing. Great. Awesome. Yeah, my youngest sister she's in college, and she's about to go to Barcelona to study abroad. So, and I have one of my good friends from high school lives in Spain somewhere with her husband who's in the military. So she's been trying to get me to come out. She asked me recently, when are you coming to visit? And I'm like, I need to go. So now that my sister's going, I'll definitely probably go next year. I think she goes in the spring. So yeah.
That's amazing. I'm so excited. You'll probably beat me on that. So I can't wait to see all the pictures. All right, so let's get to the heart and the meat of all of the things that we want to talk about. We've got a lot of different things that I want to cover. Maybe we'll just talk about the birthday so we can kind of set that aside and then go deep into networking. But we were talking, so I'm turning 38, you're 32. It's interesting thinking, and I mean, since you're over 30, I'm thinking back about all the different years, and 37 was a really, really great year for me. I published my book last year. I just did a whole bunch of things, and there's just so much to be proud of that I've created this year. And I think back to just like my entire life, I think I had the most anxiety about birthdays, and I love birthdays. Let me just say that, so far. So for people who, on Facebook where, you just get this string of like all these people who never talk to you, they just start saying happy birthday. And I don't personally do that because I like to do personal reach outs to people whose birthdays I remember and all of that. But I still love it when people post on my wall and say happy birthday, but I love it even more when people text me behind the scenes and say like happy birthday, just because that's like a little bit more effort than just typing in, when Facebook has it all set for you, like just say happy birthday and just type stuff. But I was thinking back about when I turned 30, I was like, oh my God, my life is over. I was actually really depressed before I turned 30. And then as I got over that hump, I felt like every year after that started getting increasingly better. And maybe it was just like my quarter life crisis or, third life crisis, whatever you want to call it, that I was going through at the time. And just the number of hitting that milestone just seemed like, okay, I'm not a young adult anymore. I'm getting older and the, stuff is going to start breaking. And so you're still kind of in the early 30s stage. How do you feel about just the different phases of life? I know that, my teen years were like super tough and super dramatic, and I'm so glad to be over with that. And, the 20s were great, and then, I couldn't handle alcohol anymore, and now the 30s are just a different world for me. And I know that we're in different situations because I have kids and you don't, but, just what comes to mind when you think about just birthdays and age and all that fun stuff?
So birthdays are always a big deal in our house. We're definitely the family that does like birthday months. And because of, my hectic travel schedule, I typically celebrate with multiple people, multiple times. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times I'm celebrating for weeks. It's just, that's how it is. Like I went to San Diego for my birthday this year. So I was in Dallas and I went to San Diego. And then when I come home to Virginia with my family, I'll celebrate here. And then I'll have different groups that I'll hit up and we'll hang out separately. So it's definitely a celebratory time of the year. And I look forward to it, but I also kind of hate my birthday because it's in January and the weather's always so crappy and people don't want to leave the house. And, it's just like that hibernation season. And then, it's the 24th, so it's like literally 30 days after Christmas, and everybody's broke, and New Year's, everyone's trying to eat healthy, and they're not trying to go crazy, and they're still broke from New Year's and Christmas, so it's a difficult time of year. But for me, the 20s, it went by so quickly. I'm definitely, like you said, I would not want to go back to some of those years. Because, you're young and you don't know anything and you think that you do, but like, I think deep down I knew I didn't know anything, which was great. But now I have so much perspective and, to be honest, I didn't have an issue turning 30. It was just like I'm turning 30. And my sister had this, I went to Atlanta that year and she had she decorated the whole house with like caution, this like, ridiculous caution tape. She literally decorated everything. And I had this beautiful cake. So for me, turning 30 was a big deal, and it was fun. I have yet to have any issues with it or getting older. I still feel really young, like really young. Like sometimes it scares me how young I feel because compared to my parents, I mean, my mom had me when she was 20, and by 30, by my age, she'd already had 3 kids, and she was married. She was getting her degrees and her masters, and she was doing all these things, and I'm over here like just gallivanting the world, and driving fast cars and partying, and you know what I mean? I have my podcast, but it's definitely a different, my 32 is way different from my mom's 32 and her mom's 32. So it's interesting seeing it generationally as well.
For sure. Totally. I think my mom had me when she was 28, and I had my first kid when I was 29. So it's just funny too, because I looked at my mom and I just was like, she's old. And not that she looked old or anything, but it was just like, she's my mom. And so now being in that same spot of remembering when I was like a 10-year-old or 11-year-old and like thinking about my mom, like how that's what my kids look at me at now. I'm like, that's crazy, because I do feel, and I think it's just also part of the life changes that I've had, but in the last few years, but I feel younger than I did in my upper 20s. I think when I was 27, that was the last birthday that I had where I like drank really hard and then threw up all over myself. And I was like, okay, I'm not equipped to do this anymore. So I don't. And a lot of my birthday parties are super low key, and my husband's birthday is 2 days after mine. So, I'm older than him by that much. And, we get to celebrate our birthdays together. So kind of thinking back about, here's a fun story for, thinking about when you turn 21, because it's just a terrible, terrible story, and it's just funny to look back at it right now. But when we turned 21, this was the first year that we were best friends at the time, so we weren't dating, and we decided that we were going to party it up, and we got a limo that was going to take us to the city, and we were going to hit up the clubs and be legitimately of age to go to these clubs. So what we didn't realize was that the limo had alcohol in it when we rented it, and we brought all this alcohol into the limo, but we were only taking it one way. So we had so much alcohol, and back then I was like, I don't want to waste anything. So I took any we were just trying to drink as fast as possible so that we didn't have so much, but I took whatever I could and I put it in my bag. And what ended up happening was I took it into the club, but I had it in my purse. I guess I had a huge purse or something, but somebody that was with us decided to pull a drink out of my bag and start drinking it, which is not great when you're bringing in alcohol into a club. So our entire group got kicked out, and they were drilling us, and they're like, who brought this alcohol in? And nobody wanted to admit it. And I felt so guilty that I was like, it was me. And they like literally pushed me out. I think they pushed me out by myself, and then everybody else felt guilty. So then they came out too. And then I was sitting there like, oh my God, where are we going to go? And then we ended up hopping from place to place, and it just wasn't as nice or wasn't as fun. And I remember ending up at this like hole in the wall bar in Chicago, and I was miserable. And then we just kind of took a cab home, and I like cried. I cried when I got home. I'm like, wow, that's not a good way to like ring in 21. Not to say that I wasn't drinking before I turned 21, but it was just like, wow, this is a memory that will last the test of time. So I don't know if you have any like epic, depressing stories like that, or just more maybe enlightening stories, but that was one of those where I was like, man, I screwed that up, but oh well, it's a funny story to laugh on now.
Okay, so I actually do have one. So when I turned 30, right, my sister decorated, we were in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So I landed, and it's crazy because I was flying from Dallas. I was actually there working. I flew into Atlanta, and the city had shut down because it's January, and the weather was ridiculous, and it was snowing. It was fake snowing. It was just a light coating, but like the whole city shut down. And so they picked me up, and by this time it's a little bit late, and my birthday was the next day. So we were going to go out, except we had been just like, because it was so cold, we were inside, and we were just chilling, watching the TV, hanging out. And I was like, yo, I'm hungry. Let's go out. So we go out, but then the kitchen start to close. And her husband made Jell-O shots, and I love Jell-O shots. So we took some to go, and we didn't end up eating, and because the kitchen's closed by the time we got to all the restaurants. So we just started drinking, and we drank at a couple places, and then we ended up at a strip club. And
Nice.
We were drinking there. And I actually had a friend in Atlanta because I like to stay connected. And he came out and met us at the strip club, and we were drinking there. At that point, I was gone. And we kept drinking, and then we went home, and then everybody went to sleep. Well, the next morning, my sister had a surprise for me. She woke me up. She's like, Whitney, make sure you're in comfortable clothes. It's going to be great. Keep in mind, I did not eat dinner the night before.
Yeah.
Okay, just keep that in mind. I never ate dinner. And she takes me, I'm all in like my little yoga clothes. We go to this venue, and it's a chair dancing, like a pole dancing class.
Okay.
But it was like part 1, right? So you're only doing it on a chair. We were upside down on these chairs, and they had like beads because it was my birthday. They made me wear like all these beads and necklaces, and like literally we're doing like this crazy stuff on this chair. And we're twirling, we're swirling, we're on the ground, we're upside down, and literally afterwards we were supposed to go to brunch. And I was like, you need to pull over. After the event was over, like I made it through the whole time. I was like, I'm going to be sick. I'm going to be sick. I can't do this. I can't do this. And luckily, I'm so glad to this day I made it through the class. But literally on the way to the house to change for this big birthday brunch, I was like, I can't do this. You have to pull over. I pull over. Of course, there was nothing in my system, right? I was just dizzy from twirling and swirling. But it was so embarrassing. We had to cancel my birthday brunch on my 30th because, well, we didn't cancel it. We postponed it. But we had to cancel it for that day. And everybody just went home. I went home and I laid down. But I had no idea she was taking me to a, like, pole dancing class surprise. Yeah. And, so it was just one of those, like, you don't always plan your birthday. So if anybody out there has had a birthday or has one coming and you put all this pressure, and even if you don't put pressure on it and you wing it like I did and it ends up some kind of way, at the end you can at least use it as a fun story. It's like you'll always remember that one crazy birthday.
Yeah, for sure. And when it involves alcohol, like I don't know about you, but I've got like just way too many stories that are just too ridiculous and funny, but they're all things that you can share and laugh and like, haha, I used to be that way and I'm not that way anymore. Or you're still that way. And I mean, my life is different now, but I also I'm at this place where I'm like, I don't even know if I can drink anymore. And just to even think about how when I was younger that I could down like immense amounts of alcohol and not be fazed by it, and then having like one glass of wine these days, or I'll say 2 because 1 is okay, but like if I even go over 1 glass, then I'm like, woo, I'm already like tipsy, and I'll have a martini with my husband when we go out on date night, and I'm feeling bold and I just talk out of my butt, and it doesn't sound anything coherent, and it's just 1 drink. So it's amazing how times change, but gotta love birthdays. So,
we've all done it.
Yeah. So this year for our birthdays, and like my husband doesn't even know what we're doing. I guess somebody had said like, we'll see you this weekend. And he's like, what do you mean? We're actually having some families over to our house, and all of our kids are relatively, under 10. So just having some people over and, getting like pizza and getting some alcohol and just having fun while the kids go wild in the house, and everybody just has a good time. But then I'm, because I just said wild, this is triggering me to kind of talk more about the next topic that we were going to share, which is just kind of talking about networking and how that just plays a role in everything. And so, I think that a lot of people, or at least when I talk about networking or think about networking, I think people think about it from a business aspect, but there's also, social components to networking, and there's just so much, and the whole bottom line of just networking is just connecting with people and aligning yourself with, people that you want to be around, and having the connections that can fulfill whatever it is in your life. And so I know you talk a lot about networking, and I think one of the big questions that I have, or maybe some way that I want to steer this, is I'm a definitely like deep connection type of person, and that's really hard to do when you're in a networking situation and you're just, meeting somebody for like 10 minutes or you're at a party together, or you're at, a networking event. And so I think one of the big questions that I have is just like depending on the way that you like to connect, how can you make the most of a limited amount of time to find the right people in any sort of situation, and just basically leverage networking in the best way possible. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I think, for me, the first thing that comes to mind is to not stress about the time. because, if this is somebody that, and you said sometimes it's hard to connect deeply. And I feel like a lot of times it's not hard to connect deeply because if it's the right person, you just connect deeply. It's not something that you necessarily have to search or really work for. Sometimes it's just natural. Like you'll just meet someone and you're like, I feel like I've known this person forever. Like, why is this so weird? That happens. And if you do meet someone, and if what you mean is maybe more like trying to connect with someone on a deeper realm versus like super surface level, which is what, coming from California, it's what most people do. They want to connect on a surface level. They have no intentions of going deeper. But that's the culture. So if you're looking for like a deeper, like heavier rapport with someone, then it's finding common ground and making the conversation light and about the other person or about that mutual interest and just really trying to connect. That's what typically works for me, regardless of what event. It could be, you're having a party at your house. It could be something like that. It could be a professional event. It could be a conference. It could be a speed dating, connections. If they're meant to be, they will be. You just have to be really open for it, and you have to go with the flow.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think that when I was mentioning just kind of deeper, I like to have thought-provoking conversations, which I know is not always, there's a time and place for it, but sometimes there are things that I may say or do that gets picked up, or people will share things about themselves and I'm like, ooh, me too, and we can kind of take that common ground and go with it and kind of like slowly push the boundaries to see, how far can we take this in the time that we have together, and then figuring out how to, if that conversation and that connection was great, then, how do you follow up after that, and how do you continue to stay connected? And I know, because you have a very strong social media presence and you're out there, and, we talk about like networking, there are certain events that are crafted for you to meet, you might go to conferences, you might go to, you might see certain things, but it's interesting, like when there is no structure, and I was actually talking about this with a group of college students yesterday, so maybe this will answer their question and I can point this to them. Like let's say you're in a place where there's structure that's created. Like when you're in college, like your network is everybody that goes there. There's always that common ground, and it's easy to make contacts and connections. But what happens when you get that stripped away from you? Like how do you go about finding, whether it's your social or on a business level, like how do you find that new group of people? Like I think that I also struggled with this when I became an entrepreneur, because my network was always the people I worked with, and I didn't need to worry about everybody else that was kind of running their own lives if they didn't have that like identifying thing in common with me. Like that was all I had the space and capacity for. But if you're kind of thrown into the situation where you're like, oh my God, I'm in a new city, or I've just left college, or I'm just, totally in this alone. Like, where do you start? How do you start networking? How do you find your people?
So actually, it's funny you mentioned this. I actually just did a video on this last night about why it's important that your vibe attracts your tribe, right? How do you get into that zone? And there's so many ways. When you mentioned at first, corporate and business, like you're working at a job. And I think, again, it's very similar to college. You work at the same job, you have the same employer, you maybe work the same hours, or you have the same boss. But like I've worked for consulting firms where they've had groups of people. So like there's one group called, I think it's like for African Americans in the company, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that group. And then there's oftentimes like women and women in business, or there's a mom group. There's typically groups of people, in any company, or especially a large company, that you can find, and you can find people with similarities. And if you don't know what those groups are, I would ask, or, do some research and find out what those groups are. Number one. Number two, LinkedIn is a beautiful thing. LinkedIn connects you to people outside of your company. Anybody that you've connected with on LinkedIn, you've got access to them and their connections. So you have LinkedIn. If you've moved to a new city, you've got websites like meetup.com or eventbrite.com or even Facebook events, where you can go and find events and see, like, what do you want to do? Do you have a dog? Do you like movies? Do you like trivia? I mean, they've got events all of the time. that are happening literally within miles of where you live. So you have to do your research. If you're an entrepreneur, and it's very similar. You can co-work. I've met a ton of people through co-working and through Facebook. Getting connected with local entrepreneurs on Facebook. They exist. There's a ton. I'm in groups from the DC area to San Diego to Dallas. I mean, I'm connected to these groups, so I'm always kind of in the know of what's going on. And you just meet a couple of people. It only takes like one or two people, and then all of a sudden it keeps coming, and you'll meet more, and you'll understand what's really going on and where you need to be, where you want to be. So there's the internet. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny to think that, when I was a teenager or just, going into college, like AOL was just kind of booming at the time. So it's totally dating myself. And it is interesting how social media has become such a great way to connect with people. Do you have, what types of tips do you have in terms of, trying to connect with people on social media? Because I think that, everybody's got a different relationship with social media, right? Some people are like, oh my gosh, like I need to keep my network small, or I'm going to only connect with people who like I know personally, or, they have rules around how they engage. And that might actually, be similar to how they manage like in-person relationships as well. But, what are some tips that you have on like leveraging social media in terms of like wanting to meet people? Because I get a lot of requests from people sometimes who I don't know, and sometimes they, they'll just connect with me and then we don't even talk. Depending on if I have the time and space, I might be like, hey, thanks for connecting, and trying to learn more about the person, but I'm not consistent with it. And it's something I definitely want to do. But there's also people who I know that I will connect with, or I'm like, ooh, that person was in a group with me and they said something really cool. I want to get connected with them. And I'll most likely reach out because I want to say something in private or something like that. But just to get to know them. But, I don't know if there's anxiety around that, for people out there, but just like, what are the types of things that you do that you use social media to leverage to meet people, especially when they're not in your city, or, there's not really an easy opportunity to meet them in person?
So the thing that I do online is really the same thing I do in person, and that is asking questions. If you ask a question, it kind of takes the pressure off of everyone. Mm-hmm. You just have to know what to ask, and it can be honestly anything, as long as it's appropriate. If you found someone that you think is interesting, like you said, someone posts something and you're like, wow, that's really cool. Your next thought, if you're trying to connect with more people, should be, well, what can I want to know more. Like, what else do they know? Where did they find this? Where did they get this idea from? Did they read this book? Or, what I mean? Whatever it is, pull from it and figure out how you can ask questions. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing in person. You'll go to a Starbucks and you'll see somebody and they look like amazing, or they have a really cool laptop, or they seem to be on the phone with someone and they're talking like this like epic CEO boss, and you're like, I like it. What do you do? What do you say? Is it weird to just be like, hey, I'm a stranger, and start talking to people? To a lot of people, it is. But, I'm sure you've seen little kids do this, right? You've got two boys. Little kids will just ask. They want to know. They will walk up. They're like, hi, I'm so-and-so. What's your name? And it's like, what is the person going to do? They're going to tell you their name, because there's really nothing else to do in that point, right? They're not going to walk away. They're not going to look at you funny. They're going to be like, oh, hi. They may like for a second be like, well, this is random, but that's only because it doesn't happen all the time. So then they're going to say, oh, hi, so-and-so, I'm Tom. And then you guys start talking. The next logical thing for you to do would be to have a question. Yeah. Answer it, right? All they have to do is answer it. You set them up. And so on social media, what I recommend doing is to just start engaging on people's posts. If you're, right now you can follow hashtags on Instagram. So if you love, I don't know, football, or if you love hot air balloons or networking, you follow that hashtag and you'll start seeing what everybody in the world is posting, and you can start engaging with these people that you don't know. And then if you like them, then you can follow them, and vice versa. Slide into somebody's DMs. Sliding into somebody's DMs is not always something like risque to do. People, a closed mouth doesn't get fed, and not reaching out doesn't lead to relationships. And it takes more than just reaching out. You do have to follow up. You do have to follow through. And Apryl, you just said that if somebody says something, you're like, oh, I want to connect. That's the kind of energy that you have to take in order for you to network effectively. Ooh, I want to connect. That's the energy. So that means you're going to reach out to so-and-so. You're going to hit so-and-so up from social media, from Twitter. And you have to kind of let your ego just sit in the back burner, in the corner, and let her be there while you do the boss thing and actually communicate. You can't let your ego tell you, what are they going to think of you? They're going to think this is creepy, stranger danger. They're not going to like you. You have to let all of that subside, because it's not going to help.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And, you made me think about, this one time, this person who I'm friends with, and I'm guessing that you are very much like me in terms of like having no fear about like just reaching out to a stranger and just like striking up a conversation like on the spot. Right. And I didn't used to do this before, but I have a very vivid memory of a guy who I met in a bar after I took a trapeze class in Boston. I was by myself. I was eating lunch by myself, sitting at the bar, and he came up and sat next to me and asked the bartender to plug his phone in. And I was planning on leaving at that point, but then I turned to him and I'm like, why is it that phones don't last, like their batteries last like 5 seconds? And that turned into a 3-hour conversation. And to this day, we're still friends. And, he works for a very well-known company, and we were talking about that, and I was in a place where I was just starting my coach training, and so I had all of these like idea bulbs that I was sharing, and he was totally willing to listen. And to this day, like, we still keep in touch every once in a while and check in with each other. So it's just amazing how one random question, it doesn't even need to be like, what's your passion in life? There's no script that necessarily needs to like be there. You can, if you feel like you're a little bit more on the introverted side and you're like, you just need that, like, need a go-to question maybe. But you can also strike up a conversation from like the most random and simple question, right?
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, because that's exactly it. Literally can be. And if you start being intentional with it, it makes it even better. It's weird. Random fact. There's a lot of people in San Diego who are from Boston, and I guess obviously the weather attracted all those people, but I would see people with like Boston gear all of the time, and it would be a hat, it'd be a mug, it'd be a license plate, and you look for things that are conversation starters, and it works. Let me tell you, people love sports, and even though I care 0.0% about any and all sports, I will use that as a way, because it's where you're from too, right? It's not just about the sport. Like, I was born in Massachusetts, so when I see somebody with, my Massachusetts license plate or a Red Sox hat or Patriots gear, I'm always like, hey! And then people's faces light up, they get excited, and even complimenting people. There's a lot of things that, you can get far with what is it, flattery? There's a saying. What's the saying about flattery? I don't remember.
Either.
Flattery gets you everywhere. I don't remember, but flattery is, and it's not even really flattery. It's like, find something that you genuinely like about that person and just say it, and you'll be surprised. That person will become at ease. The drama drops. They're not worried about what your intentions are most of the time. If you're really, people can tell when you're honest. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Those guys who used to meet at the bar, and I still meet at the bar, who are like, so they only want one thing, and they have no intentions of like getting to know you. You just told them your name, and they've already forgotten it. Those kind of guys, you can tell. But the guy who's like really interested in you, makes eye contact, holds the conversation, isn't darting around, isn't like talking to you like this, like, oh yeah, that's really interesting. Like, those kind of people are the ones that you want to go that extra mile with and actually follow up with. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because you never know what'll happen.
Yeah. I love it. Oh my God, it's like 3:50 already. This conversation is going so far. I feel like we could dive so far into so much more networking stuff, and we'll maybe see if we can come back to it in a little bit, but I definitely want to make sure that we cover my usual cheerful news segment, because we want to always make sure that we're paying attention to the positive things that are happening, and I want to share the diamonds in the rough of, what gets shared in media these days. But there is positive news stuff out there, and so let's just take a moment to do that. Do you want me to do mine first, or do you want to share yours, the story that
No, go ahead.
found? Okay, so I found this story, and I don't know when it came out, but I just saw it. It was kind of sitting in my email this week because I subscribe to all these random websites that promote positive stories, which is great. And there was this guy, and oh my god, this is so funny because it makes a reference to Boston. There's this guy from Japan, I think it's Japan, and he's 30 years old, and he ran the Boston Marathon, and I'm trying to, what is it? It's so weird because, like, this is not the same article that I had initially seen, but it's still the same thing. No, it is the same thing. But I think that there was a blurb that said that, like, he either won the Boston Marathon or maybe he didn't, but he is somebody who has run the most sub 2 hour and 20 minute marathons of anyone ever, and that's 76. But what's awesome about this guy is that he's Japanese, so, you know, I think there's just a lot of not stereotypes, but there's just a tendency for people who are really, really good at running and racing to be a certain type of thing. And he he doesn't have a coach or a training group or a corporate sponsorship, so he's kind of like against the grain of like what you would expect somebody who marathons would have. And he was sharing that, like, he works out once a day. He's got his own government job. He's got all of this. He's just got all of this. He's like a normal guy, but he like has all of these amazing accolades when it comes to running, and it's not following what the typical like marathon trainer or marathon trained person does in terms of their process. So I just thought it was really, really great. You know, he jogs as part of his training, and they said, like, most top American runners would never on God's earth use the term jogging to describe any part of their training. And so it's just interesting because he's getting something done in a different way, and I just love that because I totally geek out about finding a new innovative way to get to a similar result. And maybe he's not, you know, I think critics said that he's had like relatively poor performances in big races. But he also has consistency, which is just another way to look at accomplishing a goal. So, that was my positive news story, but I think it was something about he ran the Boston Marathon. So now I don't know why I can't find it now, but that was my positive news story. How about you?
Okay. So I actually want to piggyback on that. I do have my own story, but I did want to piggyback. I've been watching the news now that I'm here visiting my family. They watch the news every day, and I hate it. But there was one positive story because I think they watch the world news, which typically ends with a positive story. And the other day, they were talking about the marathon, and apparently there was a runner who was like on his just last leg, and he was struggling, and it just started to rain, and he was going to stop. I don't think he could go on. He was literally like upset, and his body was shutting down. And this woman from the crowd came and gave him her like wet jacket, her little rain jacket. Mm-hmm. And he wore it, and he finished the race. And he was like, if she hadn't done that, I don't know if I would have, like, I know I wouldn't have finished it. And so the newscaster was like videotaping him, and they were like, yeah, we're trying to find the lady because I want to give her coat back, and I want to thank her for helping me because that act of kindness helped me finish the marathon. So I thought that was a cute piggyback. It reminded me of that. But
totally. And it's just so like those little things that people do that mean so much to somebody else. It's like, it's amazing. So yeah, thank you for sharing that for sure. Yeah. Okay.
You never know. You never know. And it probably saved him from getting sick too, right? With the rain. And I guess he didn't think to bring one, or I don't remember. You know, you always forget something when you're traveling. I know I do. It was really sweet. But so we've all found those videos on Facebook that like we just start watching them when we start crying. Well, last night, in like a good way, last night it was Angela who actually had posted it. It was a video of some like teenagers in China who were doing kind of like a social experiment because a website called Weibo, it's like a social media site or app, and they were going to ban any sort of homophobic photos. They were doing a cleanup of their site, and you know, because homosexuality was banned in China until 1997, and they're estimated to be about 70 million people in the LGBT community in China. But in 2016, the census said there were about 20,000, and of that 20,000, 4% were open. But because of this ban on this website, all of these people started this whole experiment / trending hashtag on Twitter, and it was hashtag, I think it's hashtag I am gay, and the teenagers were out with their arms stretched. You guys can find the video on Facebook. It's about 3 minutes.
I'll put it in the comments too, just so that people can see it.
Yeah, it's really, really powerful. They're standing there with their arms open, and they have like little eye patches, and they have a shirt that says, I am gay, will you hug me? And they're standing there and standing there and standing there, and then people start hugging them. And it was really sweet because it was all ages of people that came up and hugged, and you could tell they were saying things that were positive in the person's ear. And so it was just really, really cute to see that. And I'm glad to see that, there's change happening, not just, in the U.S. with the LGBTQA community, but in also other countries, because it's important to accept other people, even though we may not understand them, which is why I think Weibo reversed it. They actually stopped the cleanup on the homophobic. They said they're going to focus just on like violent and other type of stuff on their site. So I thought that was a positive, cheerful news.
Yeah, and Angela, I guess she's watching, and she put the link in for us. So thanks for doing that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. It's such a great story. I mean, I think it just being more open-minded. That's always something that I am really, really passionate about, because everybody's different, and there's a lot of things about me that I feel that I'm an outcast, and I know that people might not see that, but that's sometimes how I feel, and it's really, really important to me to have people feel included, no matter what what they believe or what they choose to do in their lives. And I mean, sometimes you just find such wonderful nuggets of wealth of information when you just allow yourself to just receive, and you can do whatever you want with it. I know that people judge, and we all do it in some respects, but also just creating that space, because I think that us as humans, we just want to be seen and heard, and and just feel like we belong. I read. Have you read Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown? It was like her most recent book. It talked a lot about belonging and being open and being vulnerable. That was like, I just finished it, so I'm still like trying to process like my reflections and takeaways on it. But it was such a, like, that's what that story kind of makes me think about, is like, are you able to kind of stand up for yourself and be willing to be alone in the name of your own, standing in your own truth. And it's so important. And Angela has left her own positive news story. Yay! A man who went out of his way to be helpful to a mom traveling with 2 children on a plane. I feel like I heard this story earlier this week, and I don't know if it's now that I'm like looking for the positive stories, that they're just happening to pop out more. Because I used to be one of those people that like hated like watching the news, because, and I mean, I don't watch the news still, but like now of the news that I hear, it's all positive. It's really great to just have that filter happening and seeing that there's like great stuff happening in the world amidst some of the negative things we see. So Angela, thanks for being on and sharing all your stuff and engaging with us. All right, so we're like in our last minute and a half, so I just wanted to kind of start to wrap up and kind of share some takeaways. I feel like this conversation is definitely not over. I think that there's so much more that we can talk about in terms of networking and even just reflecting on birthdays. So we kind of did like a dual scenario here. And, Whitney, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show last minute and helping me have this epic experience. And I know that I started the show on a lower note, but I feel so much more full and vibrant now after having this amazing conversation with you. And I will make sure that in the show notes on my website and on YouTube when this gets posted, all of the references to anything we talked about will be here. Obviously, if you guys like either have a question for future shows, ask Apryl anything. There's that www.thecheerfulmind/AAA if you want to ask a question that you want featured on a future show. I think one of my big takeaways today is just like, you never know, where a question can lead you in terms of connection. So that was one big takeaway, and is always just being in that place of curiosity can really be the easiest way to network with people. How about you, Whitney? Any takeaways?
Yeah, I would definitely say, being open, being vulnerable, reaching out to people and letting your ego kind of take a back seat as you try to connect and explore the world around you. We're all on our phones, we're all sort of connected, but a lot of us feel very disconnected and alone. And even though we're surrounded by great people. So I really encourage everybody, all the listeners, all the watchers to do what you can to stay connected in authentic ways. So whatever that means for you, whether that means going to church, whether that means calling your mom or your grandma or your aunt or your sister, hugging your cat, whatever that means, but definitely connect more, because it really, your health depends on it. And, I think your livelihood does too. And it makes a big difference. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank all of you. We've got a lot of hearts and reactions and all that stuff on our show today. So thank you guys all, for those of you who are watching live or on the replay, and feel free to add any questions or comments, and we'll check in on that and definitely respond back if you have anything. But thank you so much, Whitney, and thank you guys all for the latest episode of Cheerful Conversations. Bye!